The internet decided years ago that quiet people are free content, and then it walked into the wrong reading room. Shh. Oh, sorry. Am I too loud for you? Miss Library? Jet Maloney's ring light bloomed over the study tables like a small sun, and every head in the Crestview Public Library reference room turned at once. He slammed a stack of reference books flat, with a roundhouse-adjacent slap of his palm, and papers scattered over the ESL circle, sitting nearest the window. A woman in a hijab flinched and grabbed for her notebook before it slid off the table. A teenager at the homework tables pulled out his phone before his backpack hit the floor. The camera swung into Miriam Sato's face. Close. Too close. She smelled cheap cologne and pre-workout powder rolling off him in waves. 2 million people are watching you shelve books, sweetheart, Jet said, grinning at the lens over her shoulder. Do something interesting. The top book from the toppled stack skidded off the table edge, already falling, and Miriam's hand came up and caught it out of the air without her eyes ever leaving Jet's face. She set it down on the cart beside her, spine aligned with the others, cover square to the edge. All in the same half-second, the book would have hit the floor. By the window, an old man lowered his newspaper an inch. He watched her hand return to her side. He blinked once, slow, like a man who'd just recognized a song from a long time ago. The matte squeak of a Librarian cartwheel was the loudest sound in the room for a full second afterward. Then the ESL circle's chairs scraped back, papers still settling on the carpet like slow snow, and one of the women pressed a hand flat against her own chest, breathing hard, the way people breathe when a stranger has just decided, without asking, to make them part of his show. Nobody else in the room noticed. Jet didn't notice. He was already turning to his camera, already narrating the moment as a win. Lower your voice, Miriam said. Flat, unhurried. 1 volume. The only volume she used. This is the last time I ask nicely. Jet laughed into the lens. Ooh, threat level, Librarian. What happens to Jet Maloney next did not happen because Miriam Sato got angry. It happened because Miriam Sato, for 12 years, flew into hostile airfields on the far side of the planet to keep other people's aircraft from getting stolen, sabotaged, or blown apart. And somewhere in that decade of hangars and dark ramps and countries whose names her neighbors couldn't spell, she learned exactly how much force a situation actually requires, and how to give a person the smallest possible amount of it. Jet Maloney was about to find out what happens when you go looking for the biggest reaction you can get from the one person alive who has spent her whole career giving people the smallest one that will do the job. But before we continue, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what time you saw this video. Tonight's story is one you will never forget. 12 years. That's the number that matters here, so hold on to it. Miriam Sato joined the Air Force at 22. The same year, her older brother came home from his first deployment with a limp he never fully explained. She didn't join to prove anything to him. She joined because she was good at 2 things nobody around her valued: sitting still and noticing everything while she did it. And the recruiter who interviewed her happened to mention a program that wanted exactly that. Phoenix Raven, Air Force Security Forces, trained to fly commercial and military routes into airfields with no perimeter security, no reliable local police, sometimes no functioning tower. Their job was simple to say and brutal to do. Protect the aircraft, the crew, and the cargo on the ground. In places where a plane sitting still for 2 hours was the most valuable and least defended object within 100 miles. She flew into ramps in West Africa, where a fuel truck driver might also be someone's informant. She stood 12-hour watches in Central Asian heat that cracked boot leather, next to aircraft worth more than the town around them, armed, alone, alert, while the rest of the crew slept in shifts behind her. She learned to read a crowd from 200 yards. She learned that the loudest man in a group of 10 is almost never the dangerous one. He's just the one paying for the attention. Ravens trained for exactly one outcome. Nothing happens. A good Raven watch ends the same way it starts, aircraft intact, crew unbothered. Nobody in the surrounding crowd ever fully sure a threat existed at all. Miriam ran drills until catching a falling object without looking was as automatic as breathing. A training officer once tossed a wrench at her head from behind without warning, twice a week for a month, until her hands stopped needing her eyes' permission. She learned to stand for 12 hours without shifting her weight in a way that told a watcher she was tired. She learned the particular stillness of a person who has already decided, calmly, exactly what she will do if the crowd in front of her takes one more step. Twice in 12 years, that calm decision became necessary. She does not talk about either time. Her file does, in language flat enough to sound almost boring. Subject de-escalated hostile approach, using minimum force required. 0 injuries beyond the necessary. Mission continued on schedule. The Air Force gave her a coin for one of those nights and a commendation for the other. She keeps both in a drawer at home she doesn't open often. She did that for 12 years, 3 continents. She will not tell you the names of the airfields. Some of them, she says, don't officially exist. Then she came home and she wanted quiet. Not because she was broken. She wasn't, but because for 12 years she had guarded chaos. And now she wanted to guard something small and worth keeping still. A library card catalog. A reference desk. A room where the worst emergency most days was a printer jam. She took the job at Crestview Public 14 months after her separation. She repairs spines with surgical tape, the good kind, the kind that doesn't yellow. She knows which chair belongs to which regular the way a shepherd knows which sheep wandered off. She has one flaw, and it's the reason this story happened at all instead of ending on day 1. Miriam Sato is terrified of being the scary one in a quiet place. She spent 12 years being exactly what a situation needed, including violence, when violence was the smallest available option. She came home determined never to be the person who makes a room go silent out of fear again. So when Jet Maloney first walked through the doors of Crestview Public with a ring light and a grin built for the algorithm, Miriam did what she always does when something threatens her room, she underreacted on purpose, and the wrong people paid for it first. Jet Maloney was 24 years old and had built 2 million followers out of a simple formula. Find someone who can't or won't fight back, provoke them on camera, and post the reaction. He called it flexing on NPCs. His actual kickboxing career had ended 3 years earlier at 2 wins and 6 losses, a fact he had scrubbed from every bio he controlled and buried under 600 videos of him startling strangers in parking lots, gyms, and now, apparently, libraries. He had a manager named Cole who lived in his earbud, and Cole had one instruction for every video: bigger. He had a stack of consent forms in his backpack that he had never once shown to a single person he filmed. And he had, as of that afternoon, a new target: the reference librarian at Crestview Public, who moved like weather and never raised her voice, which Cole thought made for a fascinating contrast piece. Shush the Shusher, the concept card in his notes app read. Push until she breaks. Bonus if she cries. That first visit he filmed for 11 minutes. He hovered his phone 6 inches from the faces of the ESL circle. 6 adults meeting twice a week to practice conversational English before their citizenship interviews, and narrated their accents in a mocking sing-song for his captions. He filmed the veteran by the window, a 71-year-old man named Harold Voss, who came in every day at 9 and read the newspaper cover to cover, and captioned the footage, "Grandpa's about to get shushed too. Stay tuned." "Say the sentence again," Jet told Ligaya. Phone inches from her mouth, grin fixed. "Say it like you did before. That was great." Ligaya said nothing. She closed her notebook, slow, deliberate. The universal gesture of a person, choosing not to be provoked into a mistake that could cost her more than a stranger with a camera could possibly understand. Jet filmed her closing it anyway, captioned it, "She knows she sounds funny, lol," and moved down the table. Miriam watched all 11 minutes happen. She watched her regulars, the people whose names she knew, whose kids she'd helped with school projects, whose fear of authority in this country was hard-won and specific, get turned into content for people who would never have to sit across from an immigration officer explaining themselves. She asked him once, quietly, to stop filming without permission. He filmed her asking. She did not physically remove him. She did not raise her voice. She told herself she was protecting the room's atmosphere, keeping things calm, not escalating. What she was actually doing was letting the most vulnerable people in that room absorb the first hit, so she wouldn't have to become, even for 30 seconds, the person she used to be on a dark ramp 3,000 miles from home. The video went up that night. Shush the Shusher, Part 1. It got 400,000 views by morning. Then the teens at the homework tables found it. 2 of Crestview's regular after-school kids, Devante, 16, and his friend Priya, 15, had watched Jet's whole visit from 6 feet away, phones already recording their own angle out of habit. They also, it turned out, had spent the previous summer deep in an internet rabbit hole about amateur kickboxing records. Because Priya's older cousin fought regional cards, and they'd learned to read fight databases for fun. It took Devontae 40 minutes to find Jet Maloney's real record. It took him another 20 to find grainy footage of his 6 losses. 2 of them by first-round knockout, one where he visibly tapped out from a body lock and lay on the mat for 11 seconds afterward, both hands slapping the canvas like he was trying to put out a fire. Devontae stitched that footage, silent, clinical, just the losses back to back, under Jet's own captioned audio bragging about flexing on NPCs, no commentary needed. The math did itself. Priya added 1 text card at the very end, white letters on a black screen, 4 words, nothing more. Real record, 2 and 6. They didn't ask Miriam's permission to post it. They didn't need to. It wasn't about her. It was about a room full of people they'd known for years getting turned into a punchline by a stranger, with a losing record and a good ring light, and 2 teenagers who happened to know exactly how to check. By the next afternoon, the stitch had more views than Jet's original upload. Comments filled up faster than either of them could refresh. People tagging friends. People asking where the footage came from. One comment near the top just reading, "The tap-out at 0:41 is doing more damage to this man than the librarian ever will." That was the first item on what would become a long and very public bill. Jet came back 3 days later for part 2. Cole wanted a reaction shot, something with more teeth, and Jet had an idea. He'd go after the old man by the window this time, since the librarian clearly wasn't going to give him anything usable. Harold Voss kept the same paperback in his jacket pocket every day, a battered Western he'd read maybe 40 times, pages soft as cloth. Jet snatched it off the table, mid-page, held it over his head, and backed toward the stacks. Camera angled to catch Harold rising slowly out of his chair to chase it. "Come on, Gramps, you gotta want it," Jet said to the lens, grinning, walking backward, book held high enough that the ceiling lights caught the cracked spine. The soft, worn cover Harold had carried through 2 moves and a divorce and 40-some readings. "Give it back," Harold said, quiet, not a shout. His hand was already trembling slightly, not from fear, from the specific frustration of a body that used to move faster than this. Harold didn't chase far. He was 71 and his knee didn't love fast starts. He got 2 steps and stopped, jaw tight, hand out, saying nothing, which was somehow worse to watch than shouting would have been. Miriam crossed the room in 4 strides, the first time she'd moved with any real speed the whole video, and put herself between Jet and the stacks. She didn't take the book from his hand. She held out her own hand, palm up, and waited. Something in her stillness made Jet, for one flickering half-second, actually consider not testing it further. He put the book in her palm. She walked it back to Harold without a word and pressed it into his hands, like it was something fragile, which, to him, it was. That night, she wrote an incident report. It should have been the moment the library took real action. It was 1 paragraph, 8 sentences. She wrote it the way a woman writes a note she doesn't want anyone to read too closely. Patron behavior, somewhat disruptive, recommend monitoring. No request for a ban, No mention of the ESL circle's names. No mention of Harold's face after the book was returned. She caught herself softening every sentence as she typed it, the old fear working her hands like a puppet. Don't be the scary one. Don't be the one who overreacts. Don't be the reason this becomes a bigger deal than it needs to be. Branch manager Aldous Reyes read it in 90 seconds and shelved it in a folder marked Monitor. The same folder where a library keeps things it plans to forget about. Miriam went home that night and sat at her kitchen table for a long time without turning on the lights. She thought about the 11 seconds Jet had lain on some gym mat years ago, both hands slapping the canvas, and how she'd recognized the shape of that surrender. The second, Devontae's stitch, crossed her phone screen. Recognized it the way you recognize a gesture from a language you used to speak fluently. She thought about how easy it would have been, on that first day, to simply stand between him and the room and say the word no, in a voice that ended the conversation. She hadn't done it. She told herself it was restraint. Some nights it felt more like habit, the habit of making herself smaller than the moment required. So nobody would ever again look at her the way strangers on foreign ramps sometimes had, like she was a door that might open onto something they didn't want to see. Jet got exactly the reaction he wanted, and no consequence at all. Cole's voice in his ear said one word after watching the footage: more. The third visit was different. Jet didn't provoke this time. He performed patience, which was somehow worse. He called it a citizen's challenge in his caption. Followed Miriam cart to shelf through the stacks, with the camera at chest height, narrating her every move in a soft, mocking commentary track. Hand hovering an inch off her shoulder without ever touching down, daring her to react to a touch that technically never happened. Nothing to see here, folks. Miss Library's just doing her rounds. Real interesting stuff. Real fascinating. She re-shelved around him, ducked his hovering hand to reach a low shelf, stepped past him to reach a cart he deliberately parked in her path. She never looked at the camera once. She never looked at him longer than it took to judge a distance. "You gonna say something?" Jet asked, hand still hovering. Voice pitched for the microphone, clipped to his collar. "Anything. Come on. Give the people a reaction." She slid a returned paperback into its slot on the shelf, spine out, perfectly level with its neighbors, and moved to the next cart without answering. Behind her, a kid at the homework table caught Devontae's eye and mouthed the word robot, delighted, and Devontae shook his head slightly. Not a robot. He'd realized somewhere in editing his Stitch video, something closer to a wall that had decided, for now, not to notice it was being pushed. It was, by any honest measure, a masterclass in de-escalation. It was also, by algorithm standards, a total flop. No reaction, no clip, no clicks. 900 views. Cole's voice came through the earbud flat and final. Escalate. That word should scare anyone who's ever watched a situation get out of hand slowly, one small permission at a time. It should have scared Jet too, if he'd had the sense to hear it the way Miriam would have, as the sound a plan makes right before it becomes a mistake. Instead, he heard it as a green light. That night, in the cramped apartment he filmed most of his intros from, Jet sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling the 900 views on the Citizens Challenge clips, jaw tight. 900, he said out loud, to nobody. I got 6 mil impressions on the Shush video and 900 on this. Cole's voice came through the phone speaker. Tired in a way Jet didn't register yet as a warning sign. People don't click on nothing happening, man. You gotta give them something happening. She's not giving me anything to work with. Then take it, Cole said. You're the talent. Make it happen. For one flicker of a second, something almost human crossed Jet's face. A memory, maybe, of the actual 11-second tap-out on that gym mat years ago. The specific helplessness of a body that has stopped listening to you. And how badly he'd wanted, ever since, to be the one doing the pinning instead. It passed as fast as it arrived. He didn't examine it. He never did. Whatever softness lived under the ring light in Jet Maloney, it never once slowed him down, and it never excused a single thing he did next. Fine, he said. I'll make it happen. 2 days later, Jet posted the announcement. Library Takeover Live. Followers welcome. We're going to make the quiet lady famous. A time, a date, a plaza address, printed under a photo of the library steps. Ring light already visible in the corner of the thumbnail. The library board's response was the response institutions usually give when they're scared. They talked about closing early that day, moving story hour, quietly asking Miriam to take vacation, so the whole thing would blow past without incident. Somebody floated the idea of a private security guard at the door, as if the problem could be solved by adding one more stranger with authority to a room that already had all the authority it needed, quietly repairing book spines at the reference desk. The regulars said no. Harold Voss showed up to the emergency board meeting in his reading jacket and said he'd sit in his window seat that day, whether the doors were locked or not. I've been coming to that chair for 6 years, he told the board, voice steady, despite the tremor age had put in his hands. I'm not giving it up to a kid who can't finish a fight without tapping out. The ESL Circle's coordinator, a woman named Ligaya, who'd been coming to Crestview for 6 years, stood up and said in careful, deliberate English that she had survived worse than a boy with a camera, and she was not going to let him decide where she was allowed to sit. A few board members exchanged glances at that, the specific kind of glance people give each other when someone has just said something true enough to end the meeting. Devante and Priya said they'd bring the whole homework table, extra chairs and all. If he wants an audience, Devante said, give him one that already knows his record. The stage was building itself, whether the board wanted it to or not. Jet watched all of it happen from his apartment, refreshing 3 different apps at once, watching Devante and Priya's stitch climb past videos he'd spent a year building. Cole's voice had gone quieter over the past week, shorter answers, fewer ideas. Jet didn't ask why. He told himself the numbers on the takeover announcement. 300,000 shares in 2 days were the only numbers that mattered. They're all going to be there, he told his empty apartment, ring light already charging on the nightstand. All of them. And I'm going to give them the biggest thing I've ever posted. He had no idea, yet, that the biggest thing he'd ever post was about to be entered into evidence. 3 days out from Jet's live stream, the story took its hardest turn. Not at the library, but in a conference room down the street. In front of a laptop nobody in that room had wanted to open. The board's attorney, a careful woman named Denise Okafor, who'd been asked to review Jet's prior uploads for grounds to bar him permanently, started where any lawyer starts, the paperwork. Jet's channel had a public folder of signed release forms, posted as proof of consent whenever a video drew complaints. 11 of them, stretching back 2 years, each one supposedly signed by a different subject at a different location. Denise printed all 11 side by side, laid them across her conference table like a hand of cards. Nobody wanted to be dealt. The signatures matched. Not similar, identical. Same pen pressure. Same slight hook on the capital letter. Same tiny gap before the final flourish. Appearing on a form dated a gym in March and a food court in September, and, worst of all, on a form attached to a video of a minor at a skate park the previous winter. A signature that belonged to no parent or guardian on record anywhere. She checked the paper grain under her desk lamp. She checked the font kerning on the printed headers, comparing one against another until the pattern was undeniable. Someone had built a single template, months ago printed it 11 times, forged the same 3-word signature onto each one, and simply swapped the date and location fields to match whatever video needed defending that week. It wasn't sloppy, it was systematic. Somebody, Cole, most likely. Though Denise wasn't ready to say that out loud yet, had built a factory for manufactured consent and run it for 2 years without a single person questioning the paperwork closely enough to catch it. Jet Maloney's entire consent archive was forged. Every video with a complaint attached had the same fake signature stapled to it like a magic word meant to make the problem disappear. 2 years of victims who had been told, when they objected, that they'd signed off on this, had never signed anything at all. Denise sat very still for a long moment, the way people do right before they understand the size of a thing. Then she picked up the phone and called every name on those 11 forms she could track down. The first call was to a gym owner in another city, a man named Frank Delgado, who'd been humiliated in one of Jet's earliest viral videos, an ambush during his own class. Students filming his flustered reaction as Jet narrated him as washed. Frank had complained at the time. He'd been shown a signed release with his name on it and told there was nothing to be done. "That's not my signature," Frank said, when Denise read him the letters over the phone. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. 2 years of swallowed anger finally finding a place to land. "I never signed anything. I told him that. He showed me a piece of paper and I believed him, because why would anyone fake something like that?" "Because it worked," Denise said quietly. For 2 years it worked. 11 potential plaintiffs, waiting for someone to say the sentence out loud that would turn a viral prank channel into a fraud case. By the end of the day, Denise had reached 6 of them, All 6 said some version of the same thing. They hadn't signed anything. They'd been told they had, and they'd had no way to prove otherwise until now. The same afternoon, in a much smaller room, Harold Voss walked up to Miriam's desk and slid a photocopy across the counter. Her own incident report. The 8-sentence one, the softened one, the one that had done nothing. "You wrote this like you were the problem," he said. Not unkind, just true. Miriam looked at the page for a long time. 12 years of training had taught her to write reports that captured every relevant detail without a wasted word. Threat assessment, timeline, specific behaviors, specific risk. She had used exactly none of that training on her own workplace because some scared, careful part of her still believed that being precise about a threat made her the threat. She pulled out a fresh form. This time she wrote it the way she would have written a post-incident brief on a foreign ramp. Full length, full precision, dates, direct quotes, named behaviors, named harm to named regulars, recommendation stated plainly instead of hedged into nothing. Visit 1. Mockery of ESL patrons' accents. Captioned and monetized without consent. Visit 2. Physical taking of a senior patron's personal property, resulting in a pursuit that risked injury to a patron with known mobility limitations. Visit 3. Sustained proximity, harassment of staff. Camera maintained inches from face and body for 11 continuous minutes. Hand hovered at shoulder height in a manner designed to simulate contact without technically completing it. Recommendation: permanent bar from premises. Incident referred to local law enforcement and platform trust and safety for review. It ran 4 pages. It did not apologize for existing. Something in her unclenched while she wrote it. Her pen didn't shake, not once. The whole time, the same steadiness she'd once used to write watch logs at 3 in the morning under a floodlight on a ramp she still isn't allowed to name. The fear of being the scary one didn't vanish, exactly. It just lost. For the first time in 14 months, an argument it had been winning by default. She slid the new report across the desk to Aldous Reyes herself in person, and waited while he read all 4 pages standing up. He didn't shelve this one anywhere. He called an emergency board session before lunch. The bill kept arriving for Jet in smaller pieces before the big one landed. A local news intern named Raina Ferris, working a slow week, had noticed the same forged signature pattern independently while fact-checking a segment about the upcoming library takeover. She'd pulled every public release form Jet had ever posted into one spreadsheet, meaning only to log dates and locations for a background graphic, and had stopped cold at row 7, staring at a signature that looked exactly like row 2, and row 4 and row 9. She spent her lunch break with a magnifying loupe borrowed from the photo desk, comparing letter forms until her editor found her still hunched over the printouts an hour after her shift ended. She'd built her own side-by-side graphic before Denise Okafor ever called the station, and when the two of them finally compared notes, they realized they'd reached the identical, damning conclusion independently, within 48 hours of each other. which is what happens when the truth is sitting in plain sight, and somebody finally opens the folder. Cole stopped answering Jet's texts 11 hours before the stream. Not a fight, not a resignation, just silence. The kind that tells you everything once you notice it. Jet called 4 times in a row that night, watched all 4 go to voicemail, and told himself Cole was just busy prepping the stream. He was not busy prepping the stream. He was on the phone with his own lawyer, asking how fast a name could be scrubbed from a business filing. The stitched footage of Jet's old losses, the one Devante and Priya had posted almost 2 weeks earlier, quietly crossed Jet's own subscriber average view count that same week. It didn't happen with a bang. No single viral moment, just a slow, steady climb, share by share, comment by comment. Until one morning, the numbers sat side by side and the stitch had simply won. His primary sponsor, an energy drink brand that had put his face on a limited can design, commented on his latest promo post with a single emoji, a pair of wide eyes, and nothing else. In influencers' language, that emoji is a door closing, and everyone in the comments under it seemed to know it before Jet did, and the plaza permit Jet had never bothered to pull for his takeover got flagged by a city clerk doing a routine sweep of upcoming public events. 48 hours before the stream, the city mailed an invoice for an unpermitted assembly, care of Jet Maloney, LLC. A bill for an event that hadn't happened yet, for a crowd he was still bragging about online. He posted a screenshot of the invoice with a laughing emoji, captioned, "The city really thinks this is stopping me," not yet understanding that a paper trail doesn't need to stop you. It only needs to exist. None of it stopped him. If anything, it made him louder. A cornered man chasing an algorithm doesn't back off the ledge. He leans further out, hoping the fall itself goes viral. The day of the library takeover, the plaza in front of Crestview Public filled up an hour before the scheduled start. Some came for Jet, teenagers in his merch, phones already up, chanting his channel name. Some came for Miriam, without entirely knowing why. Devante had posted a simple message the night before. "Something's about to happen at the library. Be there. Trust me." Word had spread the way it does when a community senses a reckoning is coming and doesn't want to miss it. Inside, the reading room was packed too. Harold, in his window chair, refusing to move, newspaper folded on his lap like armor. Ligea's circle sat in their usual spot, notebooks open, steady, 6 pairs of eyes fixed on the door. Devante and Priya held the homework table like a front line, laptops angled to live stream their own footage of whatever happened next, phones propped on stacked textbooks for a wider angle. Miriam had heard about the forged forms that morning, same as everyone else. She hadn't changed anything about her day. She'd come in at her usual time, hung her jacket on her usual hook, and started the usual first-hour count of returned books. Because whatever was about to happen in that room, she intended to still be the reference librarian when it was over, not a character in someone else's video. Somewhere outside, a knot of teenagers in Jet's merch chanted his channel name, the syllables bouncing off the plaza's brick face. Somewhere closer, a cluster of Devante's classmates held up handwritten signs with his losing record on them. Black marker, block letters, 2 to 6. A city clerk stood near the edge of the crowd holding a clipboard, watching the whole unpermitted gathering with the specific patience of a person who already knows how this ends on paper. Jet arrived with the ring light already glowing. Camera rig strapped to his chest, grinning at a crowd he believed was entirely his. He climbed the library steps 2 at a time, chest camera bouncing, unaware that the very device on his own body was about to become the single most damaging piece of evidence in his life. "We are leave," he announced to his phone. To the plaza, to the 200,000 people who'd tune in over the next 20 minutes. "Tonight, we are making the quiet lady famous." He pushed through the doors into the reading room, camera first, and found Miriam exactly where she always was. Reference desk, spine tape in hand. One book half repaired in front of her, as if 2 million strangers weren't about to watch whatever happened next. He replayed the opening scene of this entire story, twice as big. The ring light bloomed over the tables again. He slammed a fresh stack of books flat, the crack echoing off the high ceiling. And this time his voice went through a portable speaker clipped to his belt, blasting the line out over the whole room and into the plaza feed at once. "Shh! Oh, sorry. Am I too loud for you, Miss Libri?" The crowd outside roared through the open doors. Inside, the room went dead silent, the specific, heavy silence of people whose know something is about to go wrong and are choosing, together, not to move. Jet felt the silence and mistook it for fear. He needed a thumbnail. He needed the moment, the one single frame that would outperform every video he'd ever posted. And he had, by then, entirely lost the ability to tell the difference between viral and criminal. He stepped in close, camera angled low to catch her falling, and shoved her with both hands, full weight behind it, the way a man shoves when he has already decided the outcome, and stopped watching for anything else. It should have sent a 45-year-old reference librarian sprawling across her own reading room floor in front of 200,000 live viewers. That was the whole plan. That was the entire video. She wasn't there. She warned him once, under her breath, half a second before his hands closed the distance. Don't. He didn't stop. She let him throw first, exactly the way 12 years of training had taught her a confrontation should always begin. And only then did her weight shift. A half step back and to the side, almost lazy, unhurried, her hips already turning before his hands, finished traveling the 6 inches that used to separate them. His own momentum, his own 2-hand shove, carried him past where she'd been standing a half second earlier. His wrists were already collected, one in each of her hands, before his brain caught up to the fact that his target had simply relocated 4 inches to the left. She didn't meet his force. She borrowed it, redirected the line of his push down and around. The same principle a raven learns for taking a weapon off a panicking local guard without a shot ever being fired. Control the joint, control the balance. Let the other person's own strength do the falling for you. His balance went with his own forward momentum. His feet crossed instead of stepping. One knee buckled a half-inch, not from pain, just from a body suddenly told by its own inner ear that the floor was no longer where it expected. And in one continuous motion, the same economy of motion Harold Voss had clocked in the very first 30 seconds of this story. Jet Maloney was folded down into the reading chair by the window, wrist pinned flat against the armrest, her palm light across the back of his hand, just enough pressure to remind the joint who was in control of it. Seated, upright, unhurt, on his own live stream, in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress. The whole exchange took under 2 seconds. Not one punch was thrown, not one drop of blood spilled. 200,000 people watching a live feed saw a shove, a blur, and a boy sitting down hard in a library chair, like he'd been asked to, by someone whose pulse anyone standing close enough could see, had not changed at all. For Miriam, the 2 seconds felt longer, the way trained seconds always do, the same stretched, unhurried clarity she remembered from a ramp, in a country she still won't name, watching a stranger's hand move toward a strap he shouldn't have been reaching for. This was smaller than that. It was still the same math. Read the intent, meet it with exactly enough, not 1 ounce more. The whole plaza saw it happen through his own chest camera. 1 second, he was mid-shove. The next, he was sitting in a library chair, like a child called to the principal's office, held there by a woman who hadn't raised her voice, hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't broken a sweat. And then came the part that actually broke the internet. Not the takedown. What happened after it? Miriam did not gloat. She did not shout. She held his wrist against the armrest with the same calm economy she'd used to catch a falling book weeks earlier. And she spoke at exactly 1 volume, the only volume she has ever used, on foreign ramps or American carpet. Section 4, she said, like she was reading a boarding announcement. Patrons will not disturb others. You are disturbing others. From across the room, without any cue, Lagaya's circle repeated the words back in careful unison, the way they practiced vocabulary every week, deadpan, precise, turning his own humiliation into a pronunciation exercise. Patrons will not disturb others. Section 4, subsection 2, Miriam continued, unhurried. Patrons will not touch other patrons or staff without consent. Patrons will not touch, the circle repeated, and somewhere in the crowd, someone actually laughed. The surprised, helpless kind of laugh a room makes when it realizes it's allowed to. Section 4, subsection 3, she went on. Wrist still light under her palm, Jet's own heartbeat visibly hammering at his throat, while hers, anyone standing close enough could see, hadn't moved past resting. Patrons will not record staff or other patrons without consent. Will not record, the circle echoed, and Devante, filming the whole thing from 6 feet away, let out a short laugh he immediately tried to swallow back down. Section 4, subsection 4, Miriam said, and for the first time her voice picked up the faintest trace of something underneath the flatness. Not anger. Something closer to 12 years of exhausted patience finally being allowed to speak. Patrons who disturb others will be asked to leave. If they refuse, they will be removed. Repeat after me, she said to Jet directly, for the first time looking straight into his own chest camera lens instead of away from it. Jet said nothing. His face had gone the particular shade of pale that belongs to a man watching his career end in real time. Liv, unable to cut the feed. Harold Voss's phone caught the whole exchange from 6 feet away. And it was his flip line, said quietly to the camera a beat later, that ended up under 500,000 reposts before the stream even ended. "Phoenix Raven, kid?" Harold said, folding his newspaper closed like the show was over. "She protected aircraft on 3 continents. You brought a ring light." The plaza outside heard the exchange through the open doors and the live stream both, and someone in the crowd, one of Jet's own followers, still in his merch shirt, started it without meaning to. A single shh, soft, almost a joke. Then another, 2 rows back, louder. Then the whole plaza, 200 people who'd come to watch a librarian get humiliated, turned the sound back on the boy who'd built his channel on saying it to strangers. A wall of shush, rolling front to back through a crowd that had shown up for his content and left it running his own line back at him. Phones still up, still filming, but filming something else now entirely. Somewhere in that wall of sound, a kid in Jet's own merch shirt lowered his phone, looked at the shirt he was wearing, and started peeling it off right there in the plaza. Miriam released his wrist, the instant he stopped straining against it. The second his shoulders dropped and the fight went out of him. The hold was simply gone. No extra pressure, no lingering point to prove. He sat there in the window chair, uncaught, unbruised, entirely publicly finished, staring at a room full of people who had stopped being an audience and become witnesses instead. The rest of the bill came due within the hour, item by item, exactly like the crowd had been promised without knowing it. Denise Okafor walked out onto the library steps 20 minutes later with a printed folder and read the forged signature findings to the same crowd. Live on 6 phones, her voice carrying clean across the plaza in the particular silence that follows a public reckoning. 11 fake consent forms. 2 years of footage built on manufactured permission. A minor's name on a signature line that no guardian had ever written. She held up the side-by-side comparison sheet for the cameras. The identical hook on the capital letter visible even from the back of the crowd. This was not one mistake, she said. This was a system, built and run for 2 years, on real people who never agreed to any of it. The energy drink sponsor posted the termination of Jet's contract before the stream had even fully ended. No statement beyond the fact of it, which said more than a statement could have. By morning, all 11 names from Denise's folder had lawyers. Demand letters went out within the week. The Citizens' Challenge Jet had once used to dare Miriam into a reaction now answered, formally, by 11 people he'd spent 2 years turning into unwilling content. The SHH came back to him exactly the way he'd handed it out. From a whole plaza of strangers. At once, unplanned, and impossible to edit out of his own footage. In the weeks after, the payoff kept arriving in plain, concrete pieces. each one landing exactly where it needed to. Jet Maloney was deplatformed from every major sponsor he'd had within 72 hours. The energy drink brand's termination letter, made public by his own former manager who'd finally decided silence wasn't protecting him from anything anymore. His channel was demonetized, pending the outcome of 11 separate settlement negotiations, each one attached to a name on Denise Okafor's forged signature list. A miner's family, a gym regular, a food court stranger, all of them finally being heard by lawyers instead of comment sections. His own past losses remained, forever, the single highest performing footage with his name attached to it, thanks to 2 teenagers with a slow afternoon and a fight database, a fact that followed him into every settlement meeting like a shadow he could never edit out. The city's unpermitted assembly invoice went unpaid long enough to become a lien. The plaza where 200 people had once shushed him in unison is, as of this recording, still his most viewed piece of footage, pulled from his own chest camera, reposted 1,000 times by people who were never his fans to begin with. The library board rewrote its incident policy from top to bottom, using Miriam's 4-page report as the new template for how every staff member documents a threat from now on. Full detail, no softening, no fear of sounding like the problem. Aldous Reyes personally apologized to Ligaya's Circle at the next board meeting, on the record, for the folder marked Monitor and everything it had allowed to happen inside it. Story hour attendance doubled the following month, parents said when asked. That they'd heard the library was a place that actually protected people now, and that was worth the drive across town. Harold Voss still reads the same soft-covered Western every morning, the same chair, the same 9 o'clock arrival. He tells the story now, when asked, in exactly one sentence, the same one every time. She caught the book before it hit the ground, and I knew right then that boy had already lost. Miriam went back to work the next morning. No interviews, no victory lap, no post about it on any platform, because she doesn't have one. She was at her desk by 9, spine tape in hand, the same half-repaired book, waiting where she'd left it. Harold took his window seat. Ligaya's Circle opened their notebooks. Devante and Priya claimed the homework table, like nothing unusual had happened at all, because to Miriam, nothing unusual had. She had done, in that reading room, exactly what she'd done 100 times on 100 dark ramps, the smallest necessary thing, and then she went back to guarding something quiet. That quiet return, no statement, no gloating, just a woman back at her desk the next morning, was the whole flex. It always had been. 12 years taught her that the mission ends the moment it's over, not the moment the crowd stops watching, and she has never once needed an audience to know she did her job right. But the story isn't fully finished, and it shouldn't pretend to be. The machine that built Jet Maloney is still plugged in. A new prank channel is already filming at a laundromat across town this week. Ring light, unsuspecting stranger, same formula, different face, same manager voice, somewhere promising the next kid bigger. Platforms profited from every single second of Jet's content before his fall. The mocking captions, the snatched book, the shove itself. All of it drew ad revenue while it was happening, quietly, the whole way down. When the account finally came down, the platform lost one controversial creator out of thousands, still running the exact same playbook tonight. It's worth asking honestly what it actually lost, and what it simply moved on from. Quiet strength doesn't announce itself. It just keeps showing up, long after everyone stops filming, spine tape in hand, chair by the window empty until 9 o'clock, ready for whoever walks through the door next, expecting nothing back for it. Here's the debate worth having, and we want your honest answer in the comments. Miriam underreported the early incidents because she was afraid of becoming the scary one in a place she loved. A fear plenty of people who have ever been told they're too much, too strong, too intense will recognize instantly. Is that an understandable, even admirable kind of humility? The mark of someone who never wanted her power to be the first thing a room noticed about her? Or did Ligaya's circle and Harold Voss pay the real price for her comfort? In the days before anyone stepped in, the accents mocked, the book snatched, the 11 minutes of a camera in their faces, all of it happening because the one person equipped to stop it on day one chose not to? Tell us where you land, and tell us honestly. If this story hit you, subscribe now, share it with someone who respects quiet strength, and tell us in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. We will see you for the next story. It is already waiting.